should be established. We'll be looking at what are the government services, what parish functions, arm's length bodies, what services should be included within the remit of the Ombudsman. We will be looking at what the Ombudsman should do, what their functions should be, what methods they should use, how they would work with the other watchdogs and regulators that we currently have operating in the island, and what remedies they should be able to offer. Touching on as well governance, maintaining independence from government, and also what staffing this office might need. So, the easiest questions first to a certain extent is what is an ombudsman, what are we talking about? And they've got different types of ombudsman. Already operating within Jersey, we have the Channel Islands Financial Ombudsman, but there are ombudsman services and schemes across the world in all sorts of jurisdictions, and they look at complaints and redress in different areas. So, as we are here, financial services, property, local government, they are all looking at a particular area, but they have common features and things that they all would tend to do. They offer independent complaints resolution, which is separate to perhaps to the formality of a court and tribunal. They will be free to the complainant. You wouldn't need legal representation. You wouldn't need to have a lawyer to represent you with an ombudsman. And the approach is inquisitorial. It's not adversarial. So it's not somebody sitting in between two parties judging who is right and wrong. It's finding out what actually has happened. Has something gone wrong? And if so, can we explore why something might have gone wrong? We're looking at the proposed functions of the Public Services Ombudsman. And what we'll be looking at proposing is informal resolution of complaints. Is there any way the two parties could reach an agreement without progressing any further? Then also formal resolution of complaints by investigation or adjudication. So the Ombudsman Service would investigate what has happened. We're also proposing that the Ombudsman Service would have oversight of public bodies' own internal complaints handling. All of the public services will have a complaints mechanism, but it may be that it's not fit for purpose, that it's not best practice, there might be ways of doing things better, and that is another function that the Ombudsman could have as one of the proposals being put forward. About enabling lesson learning, if there are things that can be learned by the public services about how complaints are handled, about service delivery, also whether there's a learning champion role within that. One of the other proposals is as well own initiative investigations. A number of schemes are perhaps a little reactive, so they would have to wait until someone comes to them and says something has gone wrong. In some jurisdictions, the Ombudsman scheme can investigate if they believe that there is systemic failure. If they are aware that a number of things are going wrong within the delivery of public service or their complaints handling, but nobody has yet come forward to say that they have this particular issue. So that is also something that we are considering for this scheme. Proposals being put forward for what and how the Ombudsman would investigate. So we're talking about complaints about maladministration and service failure in the delivery of public services. We are proposing the Ombudsman would investigate the facts. What has gone wrong? Did something go wrong? And what that might be. We do consider that at the moment it may be that a complainant might have to prepare the evidence themselves, but the Ombudsman scheme we propose would investigate on behalf of the complainant. We're suggesting that complaints will be received from individuals, but also from if people have been subject to the same decision and suffered from maladministration, from certain categories of business, from children and young people, and also representatives of complainants. It might be that somebody doesn't necessarily have the capacity to approach the Ombudsman themselves, so we are proposing that they could have an advocate of some kind, not an advocate necessarily with a big A, but somebody to act on their behalf as well. We are proposing that the service would be free to residents of the island. It's important that these services are, a service of this kind would be free, that everyone can come to see the Ombudsman. But also that it would be after a complainant has exhausted the public body's own internal complaints process. So one of the proposals is that the public service in question should have had the opportunity to put it right, that there should have been an approach made to them in the first instance, that somebody should go through the complaints handling process of that entity or organisation before they would go to the Ombudsman. They should have explored all those avenues to begin with. We are proposing time limits with regard to when complaints would be investigated. It may be that after a particular length of time, there may be no records, there may be no evidence of what might have gone wrong. So there will be some point in time that we should propose time limits for what could be investigated. We are proposing that the Ombudsman could have the option to hold public hearings with the agreement of the complainant. It is a feature of the current complaints panel that they hold their hearings in public. It's unusual for Ombudsman schemes to have a public hearing to explore a particular matter. But we're also aware that this is something that some people think quite highly of in Jersey setup at the moment. So what we are proposing is that only with the agreement of the complainant, because we are a small island and there are privacy issues to take into account, that the Ombudsman would have the option to propose a public hearing, but with the agreement of the complainant. Who are we proposing would be in the Ombudsman's remit? So the basic and simple design principles that we're proposing are we would cover entities which receive public money or manage public assets and which deliver services to the public. Within Jersey, that covers a broad range of functions and services. So we would put forward, they would cover the government of Jersey, so ministers and departments and functions of that kind. We would propose it covers officers with duties in law as well. So, for example, we put there the Medical Officer of Health is a statutory office. The Medical Officer of Health has powers, for example, to close the ports in case of any infectious diseases, or which has quite strong powers. We are proposing to include some of the parish functions. If we look at the design principles that it's entities that receive public money, then the parishes do receive rates. So we would be looking at the constables, parish registrars, parish officers. We would include also what's called the non-ministerial departments. So for example, we have the State's Gref, the Judicial Gref, the bailiff's chambers, but it would only be for their administrative functions, not, for example, any judicial decisions or court decisions taken, or court services for those offices, and for the State Assembly as well, not the State Assembly business, but it would be their administrative functions as well. We would include education and the providers of education services which are publicly funded. We would also include trading and arm's length bodies, so Andean, JC, Jersey Post, Jersey Water and Ports of Jersey. And this would be, because they are entities which receive public money, they manage public assets, or the state is a shareholder within them, and they are delivering services to the public. Where there are bodies which have both a public function and a commercial function, we would look at whether it would just be the public functions that would be included within that. So the ports would be an interesting one for that. Also, where there are publicly funded bodies, where they are delivering services to the public. So we've included examples there, the Community Relations Trust, Jersey Heritage Trust, skills jersey, etc. We would be looking at where the Ombudsman sits within the current jigsaw of watchdogs and regulators which operate in the island. We have the benefit of a number of these kinds of bodies now. This is a bit of a nuanced area. What we're not proposing is that the Public Services Ombudsman would be a super regulator, a regulator of regulators, if you like. We're proposing that they should have the ability to work together. So they would be able to share information where that's appropriate. They could investigate cases or particular areas of concern that they might have in common. For example, children and young people with the Children's Commissioner, how would that work? Who would be best placed to lead on inquiries of that kind? We'd also suggest and propose that the Ombudsman could have oversight of the complaints policy of these other watchdogs and regulators. So not looking at decisions they've taken, they are best placed to regulate their own particular area, but how they might have managed a complaint made to them, as thinking about a complaint made about them. An example we might use is with regard to the Care Commission. So if an islander was concerned about the care that a relative was receiving within the care setting, and they had complained to the Care Commission about this and weren't satisfied with how the Care Commission had investigated their complaint, if they felt that the Care Commission hadn't followed their own complaints process correctly, then this is something that the Ombudsman might look at, but they wouldn't investigate the decision that was taken by the Care Commission.